Guys, and welcome back to the channel. So the Episcopal Church has just made headlines, and not for the reasons you might expect. In a controversial yet bold decision, the church has refused to assist in resettling a group of South African Afrikaans speaking refugees. Their reason? A firm commitment to racial equality. So Bishop Sean announced this decision shortly after the group of 49 Afrikaans refugees began their journey to the United States. The Episcopal Church has stepped in to help those fleeing crisis. In fact, they've supported the resettlement of thousands of refugees over the years, but this time they've drawn the line, because offering aid in this case, they say, could harm the church's moral standing and contradicts its value on racial justice. And while this may seem like a controversial stance, especially since it directly goes against the wishes of the US government, Bishop Sean is being applauded across social media for standing firm. President Donald Trump remains one of the few voices calling the South African Afrikaans migrants persecuted, while virtually every other political figure, legal body, and international observer, including South Africa's own courts, has rejected claims of so-called white genocide. So of course this news got a lot of reactions, and I've gathered some of those clip reactions from TikTok for you guys. Drop your thoughts in the comment section down below, and make sure you watch this video up to the end. I'm gonna come back to give my own 2 cents. Let's watch this.
I posted this video like 2.5 hours ago, but I see it is in the ether somewhere. It's not in my drafts. I don't know. But we're going to grab current with history, and here it goes. So what if I told you that the U.S. government is pressuring the Episcopal Church, the same church that stood against apartheid, you know, the one that's in Africa, to now help and protect the very descendants of that system that created that system, y'all, while turning its back on black and brown refugees still waiting for safety. They want that. The government wants this, okay? The Episcopal Church just ended its refuge resettlement program, as they should. Yes. So, not because it stopped caring about the people that still needing safety, but because the U.S. government is trying to make it so this type of program only is catering to certain people, but they refuse to stand for it. See, the government then wants that church to prioritize around the white South African refugees, quote unquote, that's what they want to be called, specifically Afrikaners, the descendants of the same group of people who upheld apartheid for nearly 50 years. Make that make sense. This is the same system that brutalized black South Africans, including the very people that the Episcopal Church once stood in a global solidarity with. That's right. Like, this church helped fight the apartheid. It divested from companies that supported white supremacy and stood shoulder to shoulder with leaders like Desmond Tutu. And now they are being asked to play along. Just play along with the narrative and paint white discomfort as oppression. I wanted to say something, y'all. While real black and brown refugees from Congo, from Haiti, from Palestine, from Sudan are still stuck in camps and in danger zones, waiting for that chance of safety, of freedom. So let's be clear. This isn't about protecting the vulnerable, right? It's about repackaging privilege and making it look something how we see now. But the church said no. And honestly, that's what true faith in action looks like, at least to me. You know? So let's ask each other, or let me ask you, why is the government more comfortable with protecting whiteness than standing in truth? I have an idea, but I want y'all to chime in. Even if it means rewriting the legacy of those who fought for justice, even if it means the rewriting of the legacy of those who fought for justice, for not just certain people, for all people. But now the government is stepping in, trying to make people take sides. Divide and conquer, right? But the church said no. What y'all think?
The Episcopal Church just ended a 40-year agreement with the U.S. government. What was the reason behind this? because they were asked to prioritize white South African refugees over the brown and black refugees that have been waiting for years. What was the church's response? They said no. They said that's not justice and that's not what they stand for. Since the 80s, they've helped resettle over 100,000 people, but they walked away from the money because they refused to be a part of racial favoritism dressed up as policy. The Pope also just spoke out saying we need to defend free speech and free press, otherwise the truth gets buried. So tell me this, why are churches, besides white Christian nationalist evangelical churches, speaking out louder on human rights than our own elected leaders? I mean, what happens when moral clarity comes from the pulpit rather than the podiums? Maybe it's time we actually listen.
Now, this is a church I can get behind. Of course, there is no hate like Christian love, but however, I will make a pass for this Episcopal church that refuses to resettle white Afrikaners, citing moral opposition. This is integrity, this is courage, this is dedication as a true Christian to oppose this regime and to actually follow the teachings of Christ, which is, in Jesus' own words, what it ought to be, to look after the least, the lost, the poor, the downtrodden of all people, not just of your specific diaspora. Now, thank God that this church stands firmly on their moral ground to uphold the teachings of Christ rather than to fold like wet cheese and follow a dictator.
And it's not the first. First was the Pope, Leo XIV, condemning Trump's cruelty and demanding compassion. Now it's the Episcopal Church. Preferential treatment of white refugees from South Africa contradicts everything we stand for. Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe, Trump's administration, asked the church to prioritize white African refugees from South Africa.
Looks like the Trump administration and the Afrikaner refugees are running into some pushback. Just like I knew they would. The Episcopal Church has said they're not going to help resettle them. The reason why they're not going to help resettle them is basically because the Trump administration is playing racism. You know, that thing they like to do and rename it something else? Well, okay, so here it is. The Episcopal Church doesn't think it's right and it's against their morale to help resettle only white refugees. They're looking at how the Trump administration is disregarding black refugees and brown refugees, but they're okay with the white refugees. So they said, no, we're going to end our contract with the government. We're not doing that. So there's the pushback that I knew was going to come. Now, the Church World Service, which is a global group, a global faith-based group, that's a mix of a whole bunch of different denominations. They're going to still step in and do something. They're going to still step in and help resettle them. And their reasoning is because they still want to help people, no matter what. Whoever can be a refugee, they're going to help any refugee, no matter what. So that's what's going on now ever since the Afrikaners have arrived in the United States of America.
Well, I guess this Episcopal Church with this Bishop Sean Roy says his church won't assist in reselling white South African refugees fleeing persecution. Long commitment to racial injustice. What about Jesus? Jesus loved black immigrants. I guess Jesus don't love white immigrants. These are these woke churches. These are the churches that Jesus don't recognize, that are not Christian churches, that don't believe the Bible, that are just a bunch of far left lunatics who don't know really God and who are disguising themselves as pastors.
Pastor Kate, Episcopal priest, and my goodness, where is the Office of Anti-Christian Bias when you need it? The Episcopal Church stands with the gospel, Desmond Tutu, and our partners in the Anglican Church in South Africa, and against apartheid, because to abandon all other refugees except for this one privileged group is absolutely obscene. Be very clear, this administration is only interested in Christian nationalism, not Christianity.
Hello, Episcopal Church. I'm Linda, and I'm a proud Episcopalian. Thank you for setting a good example of what it means to follow Jesus, love your neighbor, and understand your neighbor includes the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed. For decades, through Episcopal Migration Services, you have been a strong supporter of refugees. helping the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, before and after they arrive on our shores. I have a friend who is a white South African. She left because of apartheid, because of the systemic abuse she saw, because she was taught racism growing up, and she knew it was wrong. She is now a U.S. citizen, embarrassed and angry at both her home country and her adopted one. She asked me, where was the U.S. when Black South Africans were being shot in the street for protesting against their marginalization? Instead, the government believes white South Africans are in danger of genocide because of the murders of 8 white farmers. 0.00002% of white South Africans. Meanwhile, in the United States, legal residents, including those here because of persecution in their home countries, are rounded up, detained, and deported. Some are languishing in CCOT. Outside the United States, thousands of people have been waiting years to be allowed to cross our border. The white refugees from Elon Musk's home country have been given vastly preferential treatment. They were screened and cleared within 3 months. They arrived on a U.S. government-chartered plane. In other words, your tax dollars paid for it. They were met by U.S. dignitaries and have been fast-tracked for government benefits and citizenship. Pure and simple, this is what racism looks like. The Episcopal Church has been a staunch supporter in the fight for racial justice, and refusal to work with the Republican government was not based solely on what is happening in the U.S., but in consultation with the Archbishop of Cape Town. The presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, Sean Rowe, said, "I am saddened and ashamed that many of the refugees who are being denied entrance to the United States are brave people who worked alongside our military in Iraq and Afghanistan and now face danger at home because of their service to our country. I also grieve that victims of religious persecution, including Christians, have not been granted refuge in recent months." For those of you who are saying it is awful for the Episcopal Church to stop helping thousands of refugees because of less than 60 people, that is not what is happening. The work is continuing, just without funding or support from the federal government, and without having to adhere to Republican views inconsistent with the Gospels. The needs of the vulnerable, those truly in danger, those without resources, are still a focus of the Church. At its core, the Episcopal Church believes in Scripture, tradition, and rational thought. We don't just open our doors to the marginalized, we ordain them. Male and female, Black, white, and brown, members of the LGBTQ community, DACA recipients, immigrants, refugees, Indigenous people, human beings. This is what I learned in the Episcopal Church. Love God, love others. The rest is details. Bye, church. Have a nice day, and keep up the kingdom work.
So we just want to say we're ending our relationship with the United States of America. It's ghetto there, it stinks. Why would you hate us? We're such a great country and everybody loves America. Are you still bringing white South African refugees into the country to replace American citizens so that way you have the power of the vote moving forward? We sure are. We support all American citizens being replaced with who we feel is right for the country. And white South Africans who supported apartheid and stole land from people who were discriminated against are just our type. When you get down on your knees to pray, it's going to come up to Jesus and say scam likely, so that way he knows to ignore that phone call. But what will the United States do without Episcopal Jesus? Burn. Well, you know what? I'm going to go straight to Jesus. There's no way that she'll be able to kick us out of your church. Father God. Oh my God, stop calling me about this car. I sold that Toyota years ago.
Color me, please. The Episcopal Church is standing on business today. They announced today that they would be ending their years-long partnership with the federal government for resettling of migrants and refugees. And why today? Why this announcement today? Because this is the day where the Trump administration brought in their first plane full of South African refugees, who all just so happen to be white, and fleeing what Trump likes to call a side that isn't. So the Episcopal Church said, in a time where you are shutting down refugee seeking, asylum seeking for all groups, every single country, every single group of people who has been coming and seeking that here, but you're allowing them to come, we have a problem with that. The Trump administration said that the Episcopal Church would be using their funds in order to find housing and provide care for these 59 refugees from South Africa. And the Episcopal Church said, no, we're not doing that. And in addition to that, they now say they just won't have the program anymore. They'll wind it down and get rid of it this year. They also say, the Episcopal Church, that they have a long-standing good relationship with South Africa, and they have a history, the Episcopal Church, in its work with South Africa and here in the United States, of being like racially aware, having good relationships with the churches in South Africa and the churches here under the Episcopal Church. And they say they don't want to be involved in something that they perceive as racially unjust. And all I have to say is good on them. And thank you. Thank you for giving us an example of a church, a Christian church in the United States that right now is willing to take a stand for something like this. At a time when white Christian nationalism is proliferating, the fact that the Episcopal Church stood up today and said, no, we won't be participating in this, something that is quite obviously to do with race, is commendable. And I'm pleased. And as someone who has deconstructed her Southern Baptist roots, it makes me want to possibly visit an Episcopal church even more than I already did.
Okay, so now that you've seen the reaction videos from the TikTok community, let's talk about it. Yeah, so I have to say I am so glad that the Episcopal Church stood its ground on this one. In a world where institutions are often bent to political pressure or public backlash, it's powerful to see a major religious organization take a bold, values-driven stance. Their refusal to participate in the resettlement of the South African Afrikaans refugees wasn't about empathy or inaction. It was about principle. It was about protecting their reputation and remaining true to what they claim to stand for: racial equality, justice, and moral clarity. This is not just about refusing to help a group of 49 individuals. This is about what it means to extend support and who that support is meant for. Because let's be honest, this isn't happening in a vacuum. The Episcopal Church has a long history of helping refugees from war-torn religions, those fleeing persecution, hunger, violence, and political instability. They've opened their doors to people in genuine need, but this time they said no. And that no speaks, a lot. In fact, this decision goes way deeper. The Episcopal Church has reportedly chosen to end its refugee resettlement program altogether because they refuse to be part of a system that selectively assists only certain types of people. And let's call it what it is. White Afrikaans individuals are from South Africa who, by every credible measure, including rulings from South Africa courts, are not, refugees. They're not being persecuted. They're not facing any G-sides as the U.S. government claims. Their lives are not in danger. So why then were they prioritized? I mean, there are a lot of South Africans who have chosen to remain behind. You should ask yourself why that is. Only a few of those decided to relocate and be granted refugee statuses in the US. A few, like that should be maybe, I can't even say 1%, because there are a lot of white South Africans who have remained behind, and they're not even looking forward to, relocating to South Africa, to the US as refugees. To me, it feels like Artucism disguised as humanitarianism. It's a twisted invasion of what refugee aid is supposed to be. While thousands of truly vulnerable people around the world, children in famine-stricken regions, women are fleeing systemic violence, families living in refugee camps with no food, water, or healthcare, are praying for the chance to seek asylum, this group of 49 was given special treatment. A fast-track journey to the United States. Sources, visibility, advocacy, and for what? Because they fit a certain type of image? This is painful truth. Opportunities like these are rarely granted to the people who actually need them the most. Why is that, you may ask? Take a wild guess. It's not because there isn't space. It's not because the funding isn't there. It's because the system continues to prioritize whiteness. That's it. And when the pattern gets challenged, when an institution like the Episcopal Church decides to step out and not play along, that is when real courage is shown. And I'm going to be clear on this. I am in full support of the Episcopal Church's decision to refuse resettling the Afrikaans refugees. They didn't back down. This church did not back down at all. They didn't give in to political rhetoric or emotional manipulation coming from the boss's administration, which has long pushed the narrative of so-called white genocide in South Africa, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Instead, the church stayed focused. They aligned their actions with their stated beliefs, and for that they deserve respect. We're living in a time when institutions are being tested. Churches, non-profits, governments, they're all under pressure to choose between convenience and conscience. And most of them, let's be honest, they fold. They take the easy way out, but not this time. The refusal isn't just symbolic. It sends a message. It tells the world that equality means everyone, not just those who mirror the people in power, that you can't call it refugee aid if you're only aiding the privileged. That justice must remain consistent and not conditional. And this move, it sets a precedent, because if more institutions had the guts to ask who are we really helping and why, then maybe we'll start seeing a real change in how asylum and refugee are granted. Maybe we'll stop seeing vulnerable Black and brown communities pushed to the back of the line. Maybe compassion wouldn't be filtered through race, nationality, or political bias. To the people who are questioning the church's motives or accusing them of being discriminatory for this refusal, I urge you to look deeper. The very foundation of humanitarian work is prioritizing those in actual crisis. If that foundation is being compromised to accommodate narratives built on misinformation or racial preferences, then yes, refusing to participate is the right thing to do. In fact, it's the only thing to do. So again, I stand with the Episcopal Church on this. They showed integrity. They made a tough call, and they reminded us that sometimes doing the right thing means saying no, especially when the world expects you to say yes. But hey, that's just my opinion. That's my perspective. I want to hear what you think. Please drop your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you agree with the church's decision? Do you think it was right? It was the right stand to take, or do you see it differently? Let's keep this conversation going, because conversations like this are exactly where awareness and accountability begin. If you found this video informative or thought-provoking, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will definitely see you in my next video. Please stay peaceful.